So, why don't we start by just introducing yourself to those who are listening? Tell us just who you are and a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Hello, everyone. I am Noah Rasheta. I've been friends with John DeLynn for several years now, and I'm excited to be able to be a part of this podcast. I live up in Camas, Utah, near Park City. Um, I have family in Phoenix, Arizona, and family in Texas, and I've lived in both of those places. Um, I run a podcast and a website called secularbuddhism.com, and I love spending time talking about and teaching meditation and mindfulness practice.
And what's your day job?
My day job, I have a company that manufactures photography gear, specifically tripods and mounting solutions for smartphones, tablets, and all kinds of cameras.
And that company is called?
iStabilizer.
All
I have
right.
two brands, iStabilizer and Photo Pro. So both of those are product lines that I help develop and market and sell.
Excellent. So, Noah, why don't you just talk a bit about why you're participating in the Mormon Transitions Project? Why is it personal to you? What need do you think it fills? Why is this worth spending your time on?
Okay. So the main reason I think I'm interested in participating in this format and this podcast, I feel like as our society sometimes seems to get more polarized with groups, the ins and the outs, the this and the that. Um, I hope to be able to maybe offer somewhat of an example of being able to be in a little bit in both places or multiple places, multiple positions at once to help, I guess, mitigate or minimize that strong sense that we have of you're either one of us or you're not one of us. Um, and I don't know exactly how, but that's part of why I'm interested in doing something like this.
Beautiful. And you've talked a little bit about the middle way in secular Buddhism. Does that kind of form your participation a little bit?
Yeah, it
Offering a
does.
middle way to yourself or others?
Yeah, it does. My perspective of the middle way in regards to a faith transition, I think the typical association of a faith transition is that you're in a faith, and then when you transition, you are out of the faith. So you're always in a place of certainty, either certainly in or certainly out. And in my experience, my faith transition has been somewhat more of that middle way, where it's like you're in and you're out, and you're not entirely in and you're not entirely out, and somewhat more of that middle way approach.
Beautiful. So, Noah, talk a bit about the extent to which you completed kind of the standard Mormon milestones in your life, just so people can get a sense for, to what extent you really were Mormon and the extent to which Mormonism really meant something to you or means something to you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that question sometimes is a little difficult because I don't know that there's an official guideline that determines how in someone is or out. I can say I was a completely believing member for most of my life growing up, served a mission. I've had various leadership callings, from elders quorum president to young men's president on multiple occasions. I mentioned served a mission. So I think for all intents and purposes, I believed everything in the way that an active believing member typically believes for what is it, 30 something years, until one day I didn't. So
So, would you say you there were moments where you were a true believing Mormon or an Orthodox Mormon, and
oh,
you
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Um, I think if you can define orthodox as adhering to all of the standard views and beliefs as they are taught by the majority of the congregation. That would describe me well. I mean, there may be some fringe aspects that some ultra Orthodox people would have believed that I didn't, only because I didn't know it, and it was a topic that I may have been ignorant of. But everything else is just kind of check the box of everything that you're supposed to view the way you're supposed to view it.
Beautiful. Noah, if you can, describe your spiritual or emotional conversion to Mormonism. And what I mean by that is if it's safe to say that there was a point where you were absolutely converted to the truthfulness, to the trueness of the church, how do you think you got there? What do you think happened that converted you to an Orthodox believing view of Mormonism? How did it happen?
Trying to think. I think at a young age, I remember having an experience that kind of felt like somewhat of a spiritual experience that was confirmation that the things that I believed were the right things to believe, that it was all true. But I mean, it's hard to say, because it's one of those things where I never had something else that felt like I'm comparing. Is this true or is that true? It just more felt like, is the way I see and understand the world right? Yeah, it feels right. And that's the kind of confirmation that I remember experiencing at a young age. It wasn't until I was on my mission that I first had that notion of, well, wait a second, there are a lot of different ways of viewing the world, or answering existential questions. Is this the best one? And again, without necessarily investigating or doing research on any of the other views, I felt pretty certain that mine was the most accurate and the most right of whatever other views were out there.
And do you know how, a lot of people talk about like kneeling down and praying about the Book of Mormon, and they get a burning in the bosom or something, or they have a dream or a priesthood blessing and someone's healed. Were there events that sort of solidified your commitment and conviction as to the truthfulness?
I'm not sure I could pinpoint a single event like that. I mean, I remember on my mission specifically feeling just this sense of camaraderie with this new approach to Mormonism, where I was going to be the spokesperson for the faith and a representative of something greater than myself, and that whole feeling felt very right. Very, it felt like if it feels this good, it has to be that this is, true. That this is the only truth.
So, from being a part of something that felt so fulfilling, you were taught or decided to interpret that as meaning that the church was true.
Yes.
Would you say family and social pressures also might have contributed? I'm not trying to get you to say that. That's just a common factor.
Not necessarily. In my case, the vast majority of my family were not members of the church. In my social circles growing up, it was really just my parents and my brother and I. Even my older brother was never really involved or concerned with the faith. So in most of my social circles, it was kind of the opposite. Most people weren't, and at times I felt that as a pressure to question whether my approach was a legitimate approach, because I kind of felt like, well, what is everyone else, seeing in this that I'm not seeing? Why are they not interested? I remember at times thinking, especially with family members that I know were just really good people, really kind, compassionate, loving people, and then thinking, if they're so kind and compassionate and loving, why aren't they naturally asking to be baptized? And that was cause for concern. And I remember thinking, I guess that's just how things work. You can be a really good person and still be blinded to the truth that's here.
Beautiful. Noah, if you had to describe what you valued most or what you enjoyed most about your participation in Mormonism, what were the most important things that that you just really loved about being Mormon? And you're still Mormon, so I don't want to give people the wrong idea. Noah still attends the church, but what have been or are the things you value or love most about being Mormon and participating in Mormonism?
I would say certainly the sense of community and camaraderie that one gets, um, being involved with a group that interacts quite regularly, and meets regularly. I think a big aspect of it for me was a sense of connection to something greater than self. Um, that's something I certainly experienced on my mission. The idea that what I was doing was beyond me; it was something greater than me, and I really enjoy that aspect of it, to kind of remove myself from that picture for a minute and realize it was about something so much more than me. And I still sense that from time to time with my involvement on certain things. It's fun to know that you're a part of something bigger, a part of a community, and that can also be the painful thing, because being a part of a community or a group where you feel like you love and appreciate the group, but at the same time feel like you don't necessarily belong, can also be the source of pain and suffering at times.
What so I have this kind of theory that religion, whatever the divine or non-divine elements of religion are, what religion often does for most people, the reason why it's so universal and so appealing to so many, is because it fills holes in your existence. It supplies things that you need. It fills needs. So some of the things that I list that I'm interested, if you want to talk about, these are some of the things that a religion provides, or the holes that a religion fills. I have identity, morality. It helps understand why you're here. It gives your life meaning. It gives a life purpose. It gives you a sense of community, friendship, spirituality. It helps in a family and raising kids. It provides you a chance to serve. Which of those elements were really important to you? What holes did Mormonism and does Mormonism fill for you? What would you say? Which of those really stand out to you as being really important? And then talk about how.
Um, it's
When you were in the
I think
Orthodox mindset, let's frame
yeah.
it that way. Yeah.
So the sense of community and identity for me has never really felt like a big part of it. I've always had close friendships in circles outside of the church, most of which were LDS, are LDS people, but that specific link wasn't the factor that tied us together. Um, and the sense of identity, I've always kind of been in a scenario where I'm not quite one thing or the other. I grew up, being I'm a Mexican American, so it's hard to feel as just a strong sense of being one, because I always feel I'm also the other. Um, but I guess one of the aspects that did feel very fulfilling was the certainty, having the idea that no matter how complicated or chaotic things could get in life, I always had the certainty of what's eventually to come, whether that be in the afterlife or there's just always a structure it has certainty built into it, and that provided, I think, a lot of sense of hope.
Did you ever have a sense of superiority? Some people really love feeling like they're part of God's chosen people, like they have a special purpose on the earth. Maybe even they're kind of better, more moral in the true, church or the true tribe. Did it ever give you a sense of exceptionalism?
I think, being completely honest, I think it's almost impossible not to have that sense when you feel that of all the infinite combinations of of beliefs out there available in the world, I happen to have the right one. And I think it can come with a sense of gratitude, feeling like very special and blessed or chosen. But I think it's impossible to separate that from the other sense of kind of feeling like it was difficult to fully validate someone else's experiences, because as good as they may be, they're not the true way, and I happened to have that, and I don't think I was able to see that in myself at the time. I think most people don't, and I don't think the intention is to feel that way, but it's certainly one of the unfortunate side effects of being right, is that the implication is that everyone else is wrong, whether that's nice or not, or that's the direct implication. And I think it's kind of an unfortunate thing that, yeah, good people, but they're still wrong. And I certainly felt that about a lot of people, even in my own family, because like I said, most of my family were not members. And I think at times it was difficult to have to wrestle with that, like my grandma, for example, who's a saint in almost every sense of the word. But unfortunately, she was also wrong, and that's a very unfortunate thing to have thought at the time, but it didn't bother me at the time because that was just natural.
Right. So Noah, on the flip side, what were the most painful parts of your participation in Mormonism as an Orthodox believer? Was there any part of it that was hard or difficult or even painful?
I don't think so. Maybe if anything, at times growing up in a society that was predominantly Catholic, sometimes feeling like an outsider. I remember at times wishing that I could participate in the things that they were doing in their lives. I remember all of my cousins having their first communion and kind of thinking that'd be fun if I could have one, but we had our own things. We had things that they didn't get to do. They had things that we didn't get to do. And that's probably about the extent of it. Nothing too major, other than just, I think, wishing that I could fit in a little bit more with what everyone else was doing.
Noah, did you experience any doubts or kind of significant concerns about Mormonism when you were an Orthodox believer? Did you ever have kind of significant moments of doubt?
Yeah, I think so. Prior to going on my mission, I was wrestling with the idea of should I go or should I stay? And I think a part of that internal struggle was the thought that there was so much good in the world. Could it be that ours is the only valid one? And I remember wrestling with that and thinking about that, trying to understand if there is a right way. Why is there a right way? Why wouldn't an all-knowing being make it so that everyone could be right? And wrestling with concepts like that, but ultimately deciding, well, there has to be only one right way, and I'm going to embrace the fact that I happen to be in that right way. Yeah, that's probably the only time it ever even crossed my mind. And then going on a mission, and it all became kind of orthodox from that point on.
Noah, what do you think kept you committed to the church in spite of the difficulties or doubts that you sometimes experienced? What do you think kept you bound to it for as long as you were?
I think a big part of it is just the price of potentially being wrong is eternal damnation, and I guess fear could be a big part of that. Thinking if this isn't what I think it is, what harm does it cause for me to participate in this? And if it is what I think it is, then I get all the benefits of all the promises that come with choosing the right. So I remember weighing that and thinking, why would anyone ever risk that? Like, what's the point?
Kind of like Pascal's wager a little bit, right?
Yeah. it wasn't until later in life that it dawned on me that Pascal's wager wasn't safe because I was wagering on one set versus all the others, but I wasn't wagering on each one compared to, to the next one. Pascal's wager works just as effectively for me to stay as a faithful Muslim or a Jew or a whatever. And that's when it kind of then I realized, oh, well, that's not a very strong ground to base it on because at that point, I think the smartest wager would be to participate of tasting the fruit of the tree of life of all the trees and then deciding which one is the right one. But then I quickly learned that logistically that's impossible too because you can't, how do you try out every ideology in the world? So, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Noah, did you ever consider leaving the Mormon church while you were a believer? Did you ever get to the point where you're like, oh, I can't do this, or maybe I should leave? Did that ever occur to you? Would that thought have even ever occurred to you as an Orthodox Mormon?
No, no, I don't think so.
Any idea? Any idea why?
Um, I don't know. I don't think it ever once crossed my mind. And when I would hear about people who had been members and then left the church and then finding out that they like actually left, like removed their records, I always thought, why would anyone ever do that? Like worst case scenario is uh, that that it was right and now you have no hope, or best case scenario is that you weren't actively involved but you're still on the list. I don't know. I think I kind of just thought it through that way. It just never even crossed my mind